I woke to the sound of tanks rumbling outside my house. Not trucks, not construction, tanks. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming, some bizarre, war-torn nightmare. But as I threw back the covers and rushed to the window, the reality hit me like a punch to the chest. Two decommissioned military tanks sat in front of our house, their massive steel bodies blocking our driveway entirely. Flanking them were several armored vehicles, parked with deliberate precision. The HOA had lost their damn minds. It hadn't started like this. At first, the new HOA president, Lillian, seemed like the usual type, rigid, power-hungry, obsessed with making the neighborhood her personal kingdom. But my father had always said that the most dangerous kind of people weren't the loud ones. They were the ones who smiled while they crushed you. Lillian was exactly that. The first warning came a week ago. A formal notice taped to our door. Violation: unsightly vehicles parked in driveway. Immediate action required. The so-called unsightly vehicles were my dad's restored 1969 and 1970 Mustangs, pristine and gleaming. To any normal person, they were classic masterpieces. To Lillian, they were an eyesore disrupting her carefully curated aesthetic harmony. We ignored the warning. That was our first mistake. 3 days later, we woke up to find our driveway chained shut, a tow truck idling at the curb. My father, calm as ever, walked outside with a pair of bolt cutters, severed the chain in a single clean snap, and drove both cars into the garage. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Lillian, however, took our defiance personally. She wanted power, control, obedience. And when she didn't get it, she escalated, which led to this morning. Tanks, sitting outside our house like we had started a war. I grabbed my phone and stormed outside, my pulse pounding in my ears. The neighborhood was silent, blinds cracked open just enough for our neighbors to peek through. No one dared to step in. Lillian had made sure of that. She stood on the sidewalk, perfectly composed, her clipboard tucked neatly under one arm. Failure to comply with HOA regulations gives us the right to enforce corrective measures, she said smoothly, as if placing military vehicles in front of someone's house was just another Tuesday for her. You're blocking our driveway, I snapped, with literal tanks. They're decommissioned, she replied, unbothered. Technically, they're decorative structures. And since the HOA has the authority to approve public installations, this is completely legal. I clenched my jaw. Move them. Her smirk deepened. Oh, I don't think so. You could fight this, but do you really have the resources for that kind of battle? That's when I realized this wasn't about rules. It was about forcing us to bow. What she didn't know was that she had just picked the wrong family to mess with. Because my father wasn't just anyone, and she was about to find out exactly what that meant. I didn't respond to Lillian's smug little threat. I just turned on my heels and marched back into the house, my mind racing. She thought she had won. She thought she had us cornered, powerless. But what she didn't realize was that my father wasn't the kind of man you backed into a corner. He was already awake when I walked into the kitchen, sipping his coffee like it was just another morning. If he had heard the tanks outside, he didn't seem the least bit surprised. That was the thing about my dad. Nothing ever rattled him. It was like he had seen everything before. You saw, I asked, gesturing toward the front door. He took another sip of his coffee. I saw, and I pressed, waiting for his reaction. He finally looked up at me, a small, knowing smile tugging at the corner of his lips. She thinks she's untouchable, he said. That's cute. He exhaled sharply, frustration boiling over. She's blocking our driveway with tanks, Dad. How is that even legal? It's not, he said simply, setting his mug down. But people like her don't play by the rules. They count on everyone else being too afraid to push back. He stretched his arms and stood up, moving toward the hallway. Time to remind her she's not the only one with power. I followed him as he entered his office, a room I'd rarely been allowed into growing up. It wasn't because he kept it locked, but because I'd always sensed that whatever happened in this space was bigger than me, bigger than our family. Even, he pulled open a drawer, retrieved an old flip phone, and dialed a number from memory. The call was answered almost immediately. It's me, my father said, his voice calm but firm. I need a favor. A pause. Yes. Military surplus, unauthorized placement on private property. Give me clearance to have them removed. And send a message while you're at it." He hung up without another word. I stared at him wide-eyed. "Who was that?" "You'll see." Within 20 minutes, the sound of approaching engines filled the air. But these weren't HOA-sanctioned vehicles. These were black SUVs with tinted windows, moving with precision and purpose. The kind of cars you didn't question. Lillian was still standing outside, looking pleased with herself when the first SUV pulled up. The moment the doors opened, her smirk faltered. Men in dark suits stepped out, their movements efficient, authoritative. They weren't police. They weren't local government officials. They were something else, and Lillian knew it. One of them, a tall man with sharp eyes, approached her. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't need to. "These vehicles are being removed," he said, his voice carrying a weight that left no room for argument. Effective immediately. Lillian squared her shoulders, her false confidence returning. "You have no jurisdiction here," she snapped. "The HOA has full." "Ma'am," the man cut her off, "this is not a negotiation." Behind him, more agents were already moving. The tanks were being hooked up to heavy-duty transport rigs, their fate decided before Lillian could process what was happening. For the first time since she had declared war on our family, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Doubt. Fear. She turned to me as if I had answers. "Who the hell is your father?" she demanded, her voice a whisper now. I smiled. "You're about to find out." Lillian's confidence crumbled as she watched the agents work with ruthless efficiency. The tanks, her so-called decorative installations, were being removed as if they had never belonged there in the first place. The HOA's illusion of power was evaporating before her eyes. She turned back to the man in the suit, trying to recover. "This is an abuse of authority," she snapped. "I have legal documentation approving." The agent didn't even look at her. "No, you don't." Lillian's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, she had no words. Meanwhile, my father stood on the porch, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold with a calm amusement. He wasn't gloating. He didn't need to. Everything was happening exactly as he had planned. One of the agents approached him, nodding respectfully. "All set, sir. Should we proceed with the secondary request?" I frowned, glancing at my father. "Secondary request?" He nodded once. "Make it known." The agent pulled a sleek black folder from his coat and handed it to Lillian. She hesitated before snatching it from his hands, flipping it open. Her eyes darted across the pages, her breath hitching. What is this?" she whispered. "Your resignation," the agent said. Lillian looked up, furious. "You can't fire me." "The HOA board." "The board has already been briefed," the agent interrupted. "These are official complaints filed against you at both the local and federal levels. Financial misconduct, fraudulent property claims, illegal zoning manipulations. Shall I go on?" Lillian's face turned ghostly pale. "That's ridiculous. You can't prove." "We already have," the agent said, slipping a second folder into my father's hands. "Sir, you'll find all necessary documentation inside. If she refuses to step down, the charges will proceed in full." I blinked, my brain struggling to keep up. My father wasn't just taking down Lillian's tanks. He was taking down Lillian. Lillian's hands trembled as she clutched the folder. Her breathing was ragged, her mind spinning through the implications. She knew what this meant. She wasn't just losing her position. She was losing everything. "You think you can just erase me?" she hissed. My father finally spoke, his voice calm. "I don't need to erase you, Lillian. You did this to yourself." She glared at him, but it was different now. There was no more arrogance, no more certainty. For the first time, she looked like what she had always been, a bully who had finally picked the wrong fight. I watched as her hands slowly curled into fists. She was calculating, scrambling for a way out. But there wasn't one. The agent's voice remained neutral. "Your options are simple. Resign quietly, or this goes public. Either way, you're done." Lillian stared at my father, searching for some sign of weakness. She found none. Finally, her shoulders slumped. She exhaled shakily and whispered, "Fine." The agent nodded. "Wise choice." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. It was over, or so I thought, because just as Lillian turned to leave, her face twisted into something venomous. She leaned in close, just enough for only me to hear. "This isn't over," she muttered. "You have no idea what you've started." Then she walked away, her world crumbling behind her. I looked at my father, but he didn't seem surprised. If anything, he looked amused. I swallowed hard. "Dad, what exactly did you do before retiring?" He chuckled. Picking up his coffee like this had all been nothing more than a minor inconvenience. "Let's just say," he murmured, "some people call me a problem solver." For the next few days, the neighborhood felt different. Lillian was gone, the tanks had been hauled away, and the HOA was eerily silent. No more citations mysteriously appearing on doors. No more veiled threats about aesthetic harmony. It was as if the entire community had exhaled at once, finally freed from the iron grip of a dictator. But something didn't sit right with me. Lillian's last words echoed in my head. "This isn't over." And I was right to be uneasy, because 3 nights later, we learned that a cornered snake doesn't go down without striking. It started with a power outage. I was up late, scrolling on my phone, when suddenly the entire house went dark. Outside, the streetlights flickered once, then died. A deep, unsettling silence followed, heavier than it should have been. From down the hall, I heard my father's office door creak open. "Stay here," he ordered, his voice low. I ignored him, moving to the window. What I saw made my stomach clench. 3 black SUVs, different from the ones I had seen before, were idling down the street, their headlights off. Shadows moved between them, figures shifting in the dark. This wasn't just some random power failure. Lillian wasn't done with us. Before I could react, my father was already moving. He walked past me, calm as ever, but there was a sharpness in his eyes now, something I hadn't seen before. He didn't ask questions. He didn't hesitate. He just moved, methodical and precise, like a man who had done this before. He pulled open the front closet and retrieved something from a hidden compartment. My breath caught when I saw it. A handgun, sleek and well-maintained. He checked the magazine, then tucked it at his side like it was second nature. "Dad," I started, my voice barely above a whisper. "What's happening?" He turned to me, placing a firm hand on my shoulder. "No matter what you hear, you stay inside. Do you understand?" That was the first time I saw it in his eyes. Something beyond just quiet confidence. It was experience. This wasn't new to him. Then, before I could ask anything else, he was gone. I watched as he stepped onto the porch, his stance relaxed but alert. The SUV doors opened, and several men stepped out, dressed in dark clothing. Their movements were deliberate. These weren't random thugs. One of them stepped forward, a tall, broad-shouldered man with sharp, calculating eyes. He wasn't HOA. He was something else. "Evening, Mr. Calloway," the man said smoothly, his voice laced with a forced politeness. "We need to have a conversation." My father tilted his head slightly. "A conversation," he repeated. "That what you call this?" The man gave a tight smile. "A mutual acquaintance of ours is very unhappy with you." "Lillian," my father said flatly. The man nodded. "She's well-connected, and she doesn't take humiliation lightly. You made her look weak. That's unfortunate." He sighed as if this was all just an inconvenience to him. "Here's the deal, Mr. Calloway. You're going to pack up and leave. Tonight. Quietly. No fuss. You disappear, and this all goes away." I clenched my fists, heart pounding. They wanted us gone. They weren't here to negotiate. This was a warning. My father, however, just smiled. "You've done your research," he said. "But not enough." The man's expression flickered with something close to curiosity. "That's so." My father took a step forward, lowering his voice just enough to make the air feel heavier. "If you had done your research, you'd know that threats don't work on me." For the first time, the man hesitated. It was barely a second, but I caught it. He had walked into this thinking he had control. But now, standing in front of my father, he wasn't so sure. The silence stretched. Then, slowly, the man's smile returned, but it was forced. "All right, Mr. Calloway," he said, stepping back. "Have it your way." He turned to his men, giving a small nod. Without another word, they piled back into the SUVs. Engines roared to life, and just as quickly as they had appeared, they were gone. I let out a shaky breath, realizing I had been holding it. That's it? I asked. They just left? My father didn't look at me. He was still watching the street, his expression unreadable. No, he murmured. This was just the beginning. And somehow, I knew he was right. The next morning, the neighborhood was eerily quiet. No HOA patrols, no passive-aggressive notices taped to doors, nothing. It was like the storm had passed, except I knew better. My father did too. He had been up before dawn, pacing the house like a man waiting for the other shoe to drop. By noon it did. A single envelope was slid under our front door. No postage, no return address. Just a thick cream-colored envelope with my father's name written in precise, sharp lettering. He picked it up, turned it over in his hands, and let out a slow exhale. He didn't open it. Instead, he tossed it onto the kitchen table and looked at me. "Pack a bag," he said. My stomach twisted. "What? We're leaving?" "No," he said. "But if things go sideways, you are." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. It didn't come. He finally opened the envelope, sliding out a single piece of paper. It wasn't a letter. It was a photograph, a surveillance shot of me, taken from a distance. Judging by the angle, whoever took it had been watching from inside the neighborhood. Underneath, a single sentence was typed in bold black letters. "This doesn't end until you leave." I felt my blood go cold. They're watching us. "Of course they are," my father said, unfazed. "They want me to be afraid." I swallowed. "Are you?" He finally looked at me, his expression unreadable. Not even a little. Then he pulled out his phone, dialed a number, and walked out of the room without another word. 2 hours later, the neighborhood changed forever. It started with the sound of distant helicopters, growing louder by the second. Then came the convoy, sleek black SUVs, armored trucks, unmarked vehicles moving in perfect formation. But unlike last time, these weren't just men in suits. This time, I saw something different. Badges, tactical gear, federal agents. The convoy didn't stop at our house. It spread out, targeting key locations around the neighborhood. Lillian's house, her close allies, the HOA headquarters itself. Doors were knocked on, then kicked in. People were pulled from their homes, escorted into vehicles, handcuffed on sidewalks. It wasn't just an investigation. It was a purge. Lillian was dragged from her pristine, over-manicured front yard, her usual perfect composure shattered. She was shouting, demanding answers, but no one was listening. A man in a dark suit read off charges: racketeering, financial fraud, conspiracy, intimidation tactics under the guise of HOA enforcement. The list was long. Neighbors stood on their lawns, watching in stunned silence. Some whispered, some filmed, some just looked relieved. I turned to my father, who was watching it all with a quiet, knowing expression. "You did this," I whispered. He didn't deny it. "Lillian had power," he said, "but she made one mistake." "What?" He turned to me, smiling slightly. "She assumed I didn't have more." For the first time in weeks, the air felt lighter. The tanks were gone. The HOA dictatorship was crumbling. And Lillian? She wasn't just losing her title. She was going to prison. As I watched the agents load her into the back of an unmarked car, she turned her head just enough to lock eyes with me through the tinted glass. Her face was twisted in fury. But behind it, I saw something else. Defeat. I smiled. For the first time since this war began, it was over. And we had won.